What I liked about him when I saw him in person at the East-West.
So I think this kid gives you a lot of potential in terms of what you're looking for up front.
I see him in the Bears offense as a Z or a slot receiver, not the X, because they want the real big guy playing the X.
He could be sitting out there in the third round, and you could be getting a guy that could be your situational pass rusher.
I think he's a perfect fit for what I've been told the Bears are looking for.
This is my 3 technique for the Bears, especially if you don't take a guy like Jalen Carter at the top of the draft. This would be a nice pickup. Fits perfectly in the system.
My gut feeling is this would not be a guy the Bears would take.
It's a good name because that's a guy that I'm intrigued by. Obviously, here with the Bears, defensive line, defensive front is a huge need.
I think he's the best center in this draft.
Welcome, everyone, to this Barroom Network special, all about the free agent signings or agreements made today by Ryan Poles and the Chicago Bears. With me, of course, is my good friend, Danny Shimon. Danny, how are you?
I'm doing great. Day one of the legal tampering period, and we expected the Bears to be active, and they didn't disappoint. I think they're one of the first ones to sign a player, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think you're right. Jordan T. Silvera will be joining us in about 30 minutes, and we've got a short interview with Sean T. Green, who covers the Philadelphia Eagles. We're going to get his thoughts on T.J. Edwards. Danny, not too long ago, you gave me a list of the top 10 free agents you would wish the Chicago Bears might target, so they've signed 2 of the 10 already. What are you, Nostradamus or something?
Well, no, it's just looking at the Bears scheme, having studied the Bears scheme all year, and looking for draft prospects. I looked at the free agent market and kind of knowing what Ryan Poles, he basically told us what he's got to do. He's going to go out and get guys that are coming off their first contracts, not guys coming off their second contracts, looking for a third contract. And I just kind of looked at that area and that range, and I found guys that fit. And one of the first guys I earmarked was T.J. Edwards. He was a linebacker. Obviously, the Bears, needing help at linebacker. He was a guy that really has just came another undrafted free agent out of Wisconsin. Doesn't that sound familiar? Made himself into a ball player. Made the team on special teams, and the next thing you know, he's in the starting lineup. And this guy is a tackling machine. I think last year he had 159 tackles last year. The guy just instinctive. A guy who's pretty good in terms of dropping back in coverage and being a good coverage linebacker as well. So he's a 4-phase linebacker and made himself into a player. And today he made himself into a Chicago Bear with a nice contract. Although I think the Bears got a good deal in terms of signing him originally. I think he was the first player, if I'm not mistaken, that actually signed once the actual legal tampering period opened up. So that was one of the guys I earmarked. And the other guy was Nate Davis, the guard from the Tennessee Titans. Again, another kid who's athletic, who's got a nasty mean streak to him. He was a 3rd-round pick out of Tennessee a couple of years ago. Has been starting for Tennessee for all 4 seasons that he's been in the NFL. After the first 5 games of his rookie campaign, I believe he got inserted into the lineup, hasn't turned back, and he's been at the right guard. This past year was hampered a little bit by an ankle injury, and that I think he missed 4 or 5 games, if I'm not mistaken. So he didn't have his best season this past year with Tennessee. But another guy that I looked at in terms of beefing up that interior of the offensive line. Again, this list was made like a month ago, prior to everything that's happened in the last couple of weeks. So, they went off there and just got those 2 guys. And then the third guy obviously was a little bit of a surprise, especially after they went ahead and they signed Edwards, was getting Tremaine Edmunds from the Buffalo Bills. And that was probably their biggest signing of the day in terms of name recognition. So, the Bears have been busy. Obviously, I like the 2 linebackers, the 2 off the ball linebackers, but you guys know me, and you guys have heard me talk over and over again. It's all about the lines, and I know they're not trying. They're out there trying. It's just I like to see some guys up front there, defensive line, because that allows those front 4 guys will allow these 2 linebackers to go out and do their thing and eat in terms of tackles and being able to make plays on the football.
I think what we should know by now is that Ryan Poles is going to take a very meticulous approach towards building this team. And he is going to be stingy, not at the orders of George McCaskey. I don't buy that at all, or the new president, Kevin Warren. I think he knows what his budget is, and he's going to manage that budget very carefully. And some of these offensive linemen were asking, or are asking, some of them are still out there, are asking for an exorbitant amount of money that Ryan Poles probably feels is not in the best interest, long-term interest of the Chicago Bears. He's taking a very methodical, meticulous approach to these signings, and that I applaud him for. I don't want to see another redo of the Ryan Pace era, of the Phil Emery era, any of those previous eras where there was a band-aid approach to solving problems and there wasn't a cohesive, a well-outlined plan for building this team. I'm very excited about the approach that Ryan Poles is going, but as you said, Danny, there's still a lot more work to be done, and now it's the line of scrimmage, the trenches, where we need to see improvement. What say you to my thoughts?
No, I agree 100%, and that's something that, again, Ryan Poles. The thing about Ryan Poles is he's very open with what his plans are. Obviously, that doesn't tell you everything, but he just said he wants to, just because they have the cap money doesn't mean they're going to go and spend it all and splurge on the first day. They want to be able to maintain that flexibility, not just for this offseason, but off seasons to come. So that's something he's keeping his word on. Obviously, the guys they were rumored to be signing today, I am happy that they didn't sign. That's McGlinchey from the 49ers, who got crazy, premier tackle money from the Broncos. Good luck there, Denver. I think he'll by 2 or 3 years, he'll be probably cut from there. And then the other guy was Bobby Okereke, solid linebacker, but nothing special. He wasn't a guy that was going to, be a that big of an upgrade over, Nicholas Morrow. So, I'm happy that those guys got their own deals and went, respectively, wherever they went in terms of Okereke, I think, signed with the Giants, and obviously we mentioned McGlinchey signed with the Broncos. So, my one thing is defense. And I knew Javon Hargrave was the guy I really, really wanted, but I also, just going kind of recapping what I said earlier, he wasn't going to fit that limit. He was looking for his third contract. He wasn't a guy coming out of his second contract. He had a great year last year. It might have been a career year. He cashes in and goes to a phenomenal situation there with the 49ers. So I think that's a win for him there personally. So the guy I'm kind of my eye on right now is Draymond Jones, the defense tackle from the Broncos. Again, a young guy coming out of his first rookie contract. I think only 26 years old. Had 6.5 sacks last year. So he hasn't put up monster numbers, but he's a guy that makes his presence known up front, both as a run defender and as an agitator, and also as an interior pass rusher as well. So definitely a guy out there looking for. One guy I'm going to keep pounding on the table for, and you guys might think I'm crazy, but it's C.J. Gardner-Johnson. I absolutely would love to see this kid on the Bears. And again, another guy who's only 25 years old. Okay, who's we know him more as an agitator here with the Bears from what he was with the Saints and how he got Anthony Miller and Javon Wims to punch him. But this is a kid that led the league or tied for tied for interceptions in the league lead with 6 last offseason or last year. He's a hybrid safety / corner, can play some safety for you, can come in and play some nickel cornerback for you. And the one thing about these two linebackers is, and Eberflus mentioned him when he first got here, they play in their nickel package about 74, I think 78% of the time. And I don't have the numbers from the top of my head from in terms of last year, but these two linebackers now, they have these two linebackers on the field, and they're going to have 5 DBs in the backfield. So again, you have two linebackers that are very well in terms of pass coverage. They be able to kind of plant their heels in the ground and transition quickly, come downhill, be able to wrap up and tackle. That's perfect for this defense. Now you just need another defensive back. That's why I'm always feeling like that they're going to get a corner, probably a nickel corner, whether it's in free agency and in the draft. If it's free agency, I want Gardner-Johnson. If it's in the draft, we'll see what happens there. But they're definitely building this team or this defense in the vision that Matt Eberflus has. Now it's just a matter of getting those guys up front.
Respond to my buddy Swanky's comment here. He says, here's the deal with Edmunds. This is how he feels. He's an awesome player, but I thought that was meant to be spent. That money was supposed to be spent on a tackle and not an off-the-ball linebacker. Shouldn't we have spent that on Jawan Taylor or McGlinchey? Clearly not McGlinchey, given your feelings on that. But are you concerned that that money went to a off-ball linebacker as opposed to an area of more need?
Am I concerned right now? I don't say I'm concerned. I'm more surprised than concerned. My initial thought was, why not put it towards the defensive line as opposed to these right tackles, right? So, McGlinchey or Jawan Taylor was a better player in terms of overall over McGlinchey, but yet he's also a guy who has his issues, right? He's more of a pass blocking tackle as opposed to a run blocker, or reverse. McGlinchey was more of a run blocking offensive lineman as opposed to a pass blocking offensive lineman. So, both guys had their holes in their game, and you're going to be paying premium dollar for guys that really weren't premium offensive linemen. So my preference for the offensive lineman is, if you're going to bring in someone to play, right tackle, maybe if it's a 1 year or 2 year short term, veteran deal, and then now go get your guy in the draft, whether it's the 9th pick or you trade down in the first round. There are 3 guys I've earmarked in that first round for the Bears to take in terms of right tackle. And I think those are one of the 3 guys they can bring in and compete with a veteran, whether it's a McGarry, to see how he does with the Falcons, what kind of money he gets, or you bring in another guy like not saying Riley Reef, but someone in that kind of vein where he's a veteran who's, at the tail end of his career, could come in and compete with a young prospect and see who wins that spot. With the signing of Nate Davis, my next question was, what happens to Tevin Jenkins? Tevin Jenkins is a guy I thought, as the season progressed last year, kind of settled in that right guard spot, and I kind of had him earmarked for that right guard position. Now with the signing of Nate Davis, is Tevin Jenkins being pushed out to right tackle? Is he going to be competing? Is he that quote unquote veteran I've been talking about in terms of competing with a young draft pick to see who wins that right tackle spot? That we'll see what happens there. Or is Tevin Jenkins not long for this roster? Those are some questions now that I have to, ask the Brian Poles and the coaching staff and see, what are their thoughts here now in terms of Tevin Jenkins and how are they moving forward here?
Yeah, my feeling is that with all of the injury issues that have happened with Tevin Jenkins, you need as much depth as you can possibly afford at that guard position. I can't believe that the Bears are upset with the play of Tevin Jenkins. They may be upset with some of his personal habits and because he had been admonished a couple of times this past season. There was questionable relationships between him and the Bears, and of course the injury issue. And so having, I don't see Cody Whitehair going anywhere. He'll probably, as Greg Gabriel tweeted out today, he'll probably move to center. And so you'll have Davis at the left guard, Jenkins at the right guard. And then if injuries happen, you still should have, some depth at that position to get by. Danny, I got a present for you.
Right.
Today, when Tremaine Edmunds was announced as the Bears, the Bears agreed with the contract with him, I got a DM from Chris Kepner, who is with Cover One. He covers the Buffalo Bills, and I said, Chris, can you please come on, talk some football with Danny Shimon, tell him what you like, what you don't like about Mr. Edmunds. Chris, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Hey, Chris, how are you?
Doing well, to be completely honest with you, I'm a little sad today because Tremaine Edmunds is a quality football player, and I'm sad to lose him. He wears a green dot. What's that?
Tell us why you're sad to lose him. What are his positives? Because clearly the first 2-3 seasons there, they weren't as promising as a lot of us thought. I mean, he was a favorite here at the Barroom from our draft analysts. I think I recall Danny being a fan of Edmunds that year he came out. And I know a number of other guys were. But it seemed like the first couple of years or so with Buffalo, he didn't play up to expectations. But what's happened during his career, his 4-year career with the Buffalo Bills?
Well, he's a leader on that defense. He's been wearing the green dot. He sets the defensive fronts. He makes sure the linemen are lined up correctly. He communicates the coverages to the secondary. in the running game, his average tackle depth has been on par with guys like Fred Warner, Devin Bush, Roquan Smith. Um, Even more impactfully, um, probably is his role in the passing game. I mean, he can cover a ton of ground in the middle of the field. He does this effectively with his speed and athleticism, as well as high football IQ and ability to quickly recognize plays. You see, he can carry defenders down the field. He can, um, hook up and cover those hook and curl routes. He uses his height and his length to choke passing lanes and cut off angles, forcing quarterbacks to move on to their next read. This is the type of stuff that doesn't really show up on the stat sheet, but it makes a huge difference on the field. And I hope Chicago fans will recognize this more than, I mean, a lot of Buffalo fans, there was a pretty vocal and negative contingent that couldn't really see past the lack of splash plays like sacks and turnovers. So I'm excited for him to have a fresh start in a new place, and I hope he'll become the fan favorite that he deserves to be.
Yeah, yeah, Chris. Coming out of Virginia Tech, that draft, that was him and Roquan Smith, and my draft grades had Roquan Smith higher because I just felt like Roquan was a more instinctive linebacker, more of a sideline guy. But again, Edmunds was second. But again, I have to go back and think. Edmunds was only 19 years old when he came out of Virginia Tech, so he was still a young player, still developing. I think going to Buffalo, being with Sean McDermott and his staff, I think he's developed into one of the, if not the premier, coverage linebacker out there. And then I think also he's developed his game in terms of learning, be able to kind of, read and react, read his keys. And because he's so athletic, he's so big, I think now he's gotten even more better in terms of, getting through those creases and making some more impactful tackles. Now he doesn't get the splash plays like you mentioned, but this kid has been a tackling machine. He's had 100 tackles throughout all 5 seasons in his NFL career. So, what did you see in terms of when he first got there and now? How did he transition? Was it the coaching? Was it just Edmunds putting his head into the his playbook and learning? Was it a combination of both? What made him into the player that he is now?
I think it's all of what you're talking about there. I mean, he's been coached up really well. Bob Babich was a great linebacker coach with the Bills, and he recently stepped aside and now his son Bobby Babich for the past year has been the linebacker coach there. They've done a great job with that group, and just Tremaine putting the work in. It's he's still a young guy. There's this kind of running joke in like Bills content universe where draft picks or rookies coming out in the draft, we're always comparing their age to Tremaine Edmunds, and he's younger still than some of the rookies coming in. So it's you've got someone who's heading into what statistically have been the more productive years in a linebacker's career. I mean, you're age 25, age 26. I think Chicago's gonna get the best years of Tremaine's career.
In terms of a blitzer, what kind of blitzer would you describe Tremaine Edmunds? Is he an effective blitzer? Is he an okay blitzer?
I mean, he isn't asked to blitz as often as you would think, or he wasn't in the Bills defense. But when he is asked to do it, he does it effectively because he can recognize. He's got the height and he can recognize quickly and react, and he's super rangy with that speed.
Now, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Aldo. Go ahead.
I was just going to jump in and ask, how would you grade his tackling? Because the Bears this past season, despite their emphasis on good tackling, really showed some deficiencies in that area, and particularly when it came to run defense. You talked a little bit earlier about his run defense, but overall, how would you grade his tackling?
Well, the Bills have, as a defense, have had issues with missed tackles, but I think Tremaine has been on the better end of that. I mean, I'd say he's an average to pretty good tackler. If I don't have a number grade or anything for you, but I don't think that he's deficient in that part of his game.
Excellent. Go ahead, Danny.
No, in terms of Buffalo, moving on from Tremaine, I know they wanted to keep him, but I think did it come down to between him and Milano? Is that basically what it came down to?
I think that Buffalo, they're in the tough cap position right now relative to the Bears, and I was looking at the structure of that deal. It looks pretty front loaded, which I think even if the Bills were in at a similar average annual value, I think that I don't think they would have been able to match the structure because of the cap hit in 23 and 24. So, good for you guys. I think you got a good one.
Now, my other concern obviously is the Bears' defensive line isn't as dominant or as as good as the Bills' defensive line. So obviously, we all know the defensive front is what allows these linebackers like Edmunds and the other one that the Bears signed was T.J. Edwards to be able to eat and get those tackles. So, in terms of Edmunds' ability to be able to take on and shed blockers, how would you rate his skill there? Is he more of a guy that can just give him some occupied blockers up front of him? He'd be able to peek into the backfield and make plays. Or is he a guy who has developed the ability to go and take on lead blockers, stack and shed the line of scrimmage, and to be able to make plays behind them?
So Tremaine has he can stack and shed. I'm sorry, I lost the first part of your question. What could you just repeat that for me?
Is he a stack and shed a linebacker at the point of attack, or is he more of a guy that needs the defensive line to kind of create those seams for him to be able to kind of peek through and get into the backfield and make plays to be effective?
Right. So the Bills picked up Daquan Jones last offseason, and this past year you saw a jump with both Edmunds and Milano because of that ability to not have to. So one of the things that Tremaine was asked to do a lot more before this year was have more of a two-gapping outlook, and he's been freed up much more by the presence of Daquan Jones in the middle. So yeah, that would be certainly something that would benefit his game, is to have a big one-tech defensive tackle who can eat up space, take up a couple gaps. As it would help any linebacker, I would think. But, I think it did. You did see it unlock him.
Chris, I want to thank you immensely for popping in here at the last minute. Really appreciate your insight. Danny, you have any last questions for Chris before we let him go?
No, just the one thing. Again, Chris, thanks again for jumping on, like Aldo said. But the one thing, he was a middle linebacker in Buffalo. Here's, I think, and it's just a assumption on my part, I think he's going to be kicked out here to the weak side linebacker. Is there anything that would concern you, having him be a weak side linebacker as opposed to inside as a middle linebacker?
I don't think so. I mean, he's such a good linebacker in coverage. I think that, I really wouldn't be too concerned. I honestly, he thrives in that middle linebacker role, in the at least the play caller role. I don't know if you guys have a sense at this point of who's going to wear that green dot in the Bears defense next year, but Tremaine was definitely effective when given that task. So I would not be concerned at all if he's asked to do that.
And then did they ever tell you guys why he picks 49? That's a little bit of a different number for a linebacker.
I'm not sure. I actually don't know if he has ever said, to be quite honest with you.
Just some of the weird thing. I always see 49 that they're flying around all over the place. I'm like, that looks like more like a big safety than a linebacker. But yeah.
Yeah, I wonder what number will wear Chicago.
Yeah. What's funny is the Eagles today put into the NFL competition committee or whatever committee looks at these things. They want to expand the numbers that punters can wear into the 40s and so forth. And I'm like, really, Eagles? you're thinking about that now on the first day of legal tampering? But Chris, I want to thank you again very much for popping in, and we'll be bugging you again down the road, particularly when the Bears and Bills play again. All right,
thanks for having me. And just want to say, if you guys are interested in seeing more Tremaine film, the Cover One founder, Eric Turner, has put out a bunch of film breakdowns. I can send you guys the links if you want to throw them in the description or whatever you usually do. But it's definitely worth a look, and really, if you want a closer insight into what Tremaine might bring to Chicago.
That's fantastic, Chris, and we'll tweet that out as well. So, please send that to us, and we really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks again for having me, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you. Take care, Chris. All right. Here's what I want to do. As we, in about 5 minutes, Jordan is going to pop in here. I want to share with people a clip from our Barroom draft exclusives. For the first time ever in the Barroom history, we've opened up a Patreon.com account, and Greg Gabriel, the former director of scouting for the Chicago Bears, and Danny Shimon are providing scouting reports. And so I wanted to play one of the scouting reports that Danny filed probably around 3-4 weeks ago. So take a look at this and to get a taste of what many of the people who are in our chat room are subscribing to, and hopefully you will too. Take a look.
Isaiah McGuire is a kid that when I put on his tape, I hadn't really watched him much throughout the year, but when I put on his tape and I started watching him more, the more I watched, the more I liked. There's a kid, 6'4", 271, a 2-year starter. 2022 was an all SEC second team player. Has started 23 straight games at Missouri. And if you take a look at his production, it just continued to get better. It seems like every year, year in, year out. We've got 3 sacks his first year, and 6 next year, and 8.5 for a total of 17.5 sacks throughout his career, 4 forced fumbles. The things I like about Isaiah McGuire is solid size with room to growth. This is a guy that can still get bigger, still get stronger up at that point of attack. Solid play strength. Physical football player. This guy has knockback power in his hands. He can convert speed to power and bull rush an offensive lineman. Solid use of his hands. You see his rip under move to be able to get underneath the armpit of the offensive tackle and gain that leverage. You also see a swim move as part of his artillery. So he uses his hands. He has some idea in terms of what he's going to do as a pass rusher. If you watch that Georgia tape, which I did, he gave Broderick Jones, their left tackle, who many see as a possible first-round pick, all he could handle in that game against Georgia. Solid versus the run, can take on a pulling guard and still be able to set the edge. So those are the positives that I saw that jumped out to me when I watched Isaiah McGuire at Missouri. And some of the negatives, if you want to call them negatives, he's not a twitchy player off the edge. He's more of a power rusher. He's not a guy that's going to beat you with natural bend and athletic ability. He's going to be a guy that's going to combine his size, his strength, and be able to, and then some of those quickness, be able to get past that offensive lineman, either bully him into the backfield or just kind of work his way, through the offensive lineman and into the backfield. Again, another one of these pass rushers elevates his pad level. He's got to be able to play behind his pads, win the leverage battle. You win a leverage battle versus offensive lineman, most often times than not, you win the war in terms of getting to that quarterback or doing your job. Has to have a counter. There's a lot of times these defensive ends or pass rushers, they get these pass rush moves, they get past up into what you want to call the alley in terms of where the quarterback is, but then they get just ridden right back past that pocket, and that quarterback can just step up into that big gaping hole he leaves there or find a receiver underneath or whatnot. He's got to be able to either develop a spin move or some sort of counter where he can come back, cross the face mask of the offensive lineman and get his inside shoulder and get a beeline to the quarterback. So that's an area where he's going to have to move. But again, he's a guy that's going to have to develop and get better and get coached up. So these are just some things where you look at and say, all right, this is where this kid can get better. This is where this kid can become a more complete defensive end. But overall, in terms of my summary, he's a guy that fits the Bears scheme because I think he can build up and be a defensive end there and be a guy in your 4-3 scheme that can continue to get after the quarterback, continue to get better. Like I said, he already has an idea in terms of what he does or how he needs to win with his hand usage in terms of pass rush moves. Now we just coach him up, get him a little bit stronger versus the run. He's got to be able to, be a better in terms of setting the edge, just make him a more overall complete player. And now you add a guy with that physicality, with that, with that ability, the competitiveness to be able to develop and to be a nice, good defensive end for you. And so that's how I see this guy as a potential 4-3 defensive end for the Bears scheme.
I had a chance to talk to him down at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, how are you?
Blessing you.
Really good. One of our scouts in our organization is in love with your game and sees your upside being incredible. Tell me about your game. What are you most proud of, and what are some of the things that you'd like to work on?
Well, sure. I'm most proud of one, my love for the game. My physicality, my relentless motor, my relentless effort. Like I said, man, you got to play the game of football right and correct. You get in what you put in. What you put in is what you get out of it. Like I said, I want to put everything that I can into it. God willing for sure.
I've been asking a lot of players this question. I'm getting great responses. I'd like to ask you, can you recall a time in a game where you were facing adversity, and how did you respond to that adversity?
Sure. I mean, you look at my entire years at Mizzou, man. Like I said, it was adversity every year. So like I said, that's definitely building character, building mental toughness, and building resiliency. For me as a player, and definitely as a person.
What are you hoping for in the NFL? What are your dreams, and how badly do you want to be in the NFL and play at a high level?
Absolutely, man. Like I say, being here, proves that, you want it. For sure, like, for me, I want to have a, longevity type of career, like I said, where I can touch a lot of lives and, make an impact in communities. And like I said, really be an inspiration, reflect Jesus Christ, who I am and my character and how I walk.
Is there any particular scheme that you prefer to play in?
Honestly, like I said, I feel like I definitely flourished as an edge piece. When we went back to, the more traditional 4-3 or 4-2-5 defense at the University of Missouri, man. So, but I definitely showed versatility, throughout my entire collegiate career for sure. Like I said.
Is there a quarterback in the NFL that you're looking forward to sacking?
All of them.
Good luck to you, man.
That was Isaiah McGuire, and that was Danny Shimon's scouting report on him that you can find at patreon.com/barroom draft. It's just $5 a month to get all of Danny's scouting reports, and then add another $5 a month for Greg Gabriel's as well. And with just a couple of months left before the draft, if you sign up now, you're paying a very, very little cost for some outstanding draft reports. Danny, anything regarding what Chris said about Edmunds that stuck out to you and that you'd like to comment on?
No, I mean, just the continued growth of the player. I mean, like I mentioned earlier with him, coming out with, and he was in that Roquan Smith draft. And again, he was second behind Roquan for me in terms of linebacker, just because I think, Roquan, like I said earlier, was just a better instinctive player in terms of reading his keys and being able to get to the, the point of contact, and being able to get to the ball carrier. And I think, Edmunds showed promise, he showed the physical gifts that we see today, big 6'5", 250 plus pound, athletic linebacker with, linebacker with long strides that can get from point A to point B real quickly. So I think, again, he was just a 20 or 19 or 20 years old. I forgot. He was really young. He's been in the league for 5 years now and just continuing to get better. And we talked about it earlier with T.J. Edwards. He's a guy, another linebacker that gives you really good coverage skills. And Chris kind of confirmed that in terms of his ability to be able to go drop back and be, a menace in terms of, the pass coverage and all that stuff. So I think the Bears really improved themselves in terms of pass defense. And I think they got themselves two linebackers that, be able, like I said, transition quickly down. If they're dropping back to their landmarks, they can see anything comes down in front of them. They can transition quickly, plant their back leg, and just kind of come downhill, and are pretty good wrap up tacklers. So I think that's the idea that, and then what Eberflus and his staff wants to do here. Just athletic guys that can make plays sideline to sideline if need to in the run game, but also guys in coverage won't hurt you, and able to give you some some playmaking ability, some nice coverage, and be able to get you off the field on third down. So surprised that they went two off the ball linebackers initially, but like I said, they're still trying to work now and get some of those guys up front now. And as Chris said, he got better, he being Tremaine Edmunds, when they got Daquan Jones this year, and he's a bigger body defensive lineman up front that can take on two blockers and kind of occupy space and allow athletic linebackers like Milano over there with Buffalo and Edmunds to be able to kind of run and make plays there, and kind of rack up those tackle numbers. So that's what the Bears are probably going to be looking to do here as well, is get some guys up front that will allow these two guys to go ahead and get those tackles and also make plays on the ball.
All right. Without further ado, I want to bring in Jordan T. Silvera into the conversation. And anytime we have Jordan in the house, in the bar room, it results in extremely fun conversation, sometimes debates, sometimes disagreements. But I got a feeling today this is going to be a love fest, because Jordan has been on Twitter today expressing his excitement about today's Ryan Poles deals. Jordan, how are you, my friend?
I'm well. Good evening, Barflies. Danny, good to see you. Pleasure to join you both. And I'm excited to talk about today. It's a good day to be a Chicago Bears fan, that's for sure.
There you go. Why don't we start with Tremaine Edmunds and give us your scouting report on Edmunds and how you feel about that signing.
Absolutely. To me, Tremaine Edmunds, similar to Danny, I thought was my linebacker 2 in that 2018 class. As much as I would tell you that I loved, and I'm a guy that likes big linebackers, athletic freaks. You're going to hear me call Tremaine Edmunds a condor for his wingspan and just the athletic traits that he has. But it was no doubt in my mind that back in 2018, when you're running that Vic Fangio 3-4 odd front defense, you want a guy that's instinctive, a little smaller. You can deal with some of what Roquan Smith had. Now, if you knew that, in 5-6 years later, you were going to be moving to that even front, of course, you would have rather had Tremaine Edmunds, this guy that's 6'5", 250, condor wingspan, great in coverage. So the move makes sense. It's, just odd how you end up swapping linebackers in that draft class. To me, it's going to be interesting to see his fit. I can't ever tell you that I love a contract for an off-ball linebacker that's so, I guess you could say, risky, so ambitious. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that it's a bad move. It just means that the way I'd put it is you are trying to thread a tighter needle at that point. The moment that you say I'm willing to pay an off-ball linebacker $18 million, it's not that a Tremaine Edmunds can't live up to that, but boy, he's got to be special to be able to do that. So if Ryan Poles and Ian Cunningham and company are willing to try to thread that needle a little tighter and say, this is our guy, this is going to be the Shaq Leonard and the maniac of this defense, then who am I to argue with it? Let's see it. The results are the only thing that we can wait for, but I'm excited about it.
Go ahead, Danny.
Yeah, that's the thing, Jordan. You mentioned that's something I forgot to mention earlier when we talked about him. Man, this is going to be, Matt Eberflus's, Shaq Leonard, if you will. The guy that's going to be able to, like I said, make plays on the ball in terms of whether it's, tip balls, interceptions. The splash plays that, our guest earlier, Chris, said that, he kind of lacked in Buffalo. So, I think that putting him in the weak side position here with this defense, it's going to give Edmunds an opportunity that he didn't have in Buffalo, play in the middle. So I think that's something to look forward to as well when you kind of project to see where he goes here. So, my biggest, I was even more excited about TJ Edwards. I talk about another, tackling machine, 159 tackles this year. Another, undrafted free agent out of Wisconsin. Sounds familiar, right? Just makes his way on the roster and develops into a nice, starting linebacker. And I think, he also was the guy with the green dot. So it would be curious to see, what they do here in terms of, the Bears and who's going to be calling the play. So what were your initial results or thoughts on TJ Edwards signing there, Jordan?
Love the TJ Edwards side, Danny. The reason for it is, again, I'm like, to me, what free agency represents, and I've said this before, is it's an arena that's rife for overpaying and regret. And I just think, again, you're talking about where can you find value. And so to me, getting TJ Edwards for, what was it, about $6 million annual average per year, that's really not a bad deal for a guy that, when surrounded by talent, and I'll use this as a bit of a negative, but again, I think it's positive. One thing we absolutely know is the floor for TJ Edwards is that when he's surrounded by a ton of great talent, he's a tackle machine that just gets after it. And again, I mean, to me, this has Ian Cunningham's fingerprints all over it. This is a guy that came in as a Badger, undrafted, as you said, had to play special teams, work his way up the depth chart. I mean, had competition brought in the form of Nakobe Dean, then Nakobe Dean couldn't even see the field because of TJ Edwards. He and Kazir White were playing that off-ball linebacker there. So, I mean, wore the green dot, got everybody lined up, called the plays, and then showed enough instinctive play and football intelligence to be able to ID what the offense was doing and get to whatever spot was needed on the field. I mean, and this is the thing. I know we talk about RAS scores, wasn't extremely athletic coming out, but the tape shows something different. I mean, there's tape of him scraping over the top to cover Taysom Hill on a QB power. Taysom Hill's extremely explosive. You've got play of him running from the far hash over to Jonathan Taylor from the Colts on a screen. Like the tape is gorgeous of TJ Edwards, and that's where I was a big Bobby Okereke fan. Glad to see he went to the Giants. Happy he got a deal, but TJ Edwards is no drop off, no slouch in that department. I was excited to see him as the first signing today.
Hey, guys, earlier today I spoke with Sean Green, who covers the Philadelphia Eagles along with runs a gambling podcast. And I wanted to get his thoughts because he's helped us before every time something Eagles related impacts the Chicago Bears. And so I reached out to him, and here's a 5-minute interview I had with him earlier today. Now let me welcome in Sean Green from the SGP Network. His flagship show is the Sports Gambling Podcast. Sean, how are you?
Doing great, man. How about you? Free agency,
yes.
huh?
Exciting day here in Chicago. A number of signings. Tremaine Edmunds, the big signing. But you're here to talk about the Eagles middle linebacker who the Bears signed, TJ Edwards. What can you tell us about the type of player Edwards is?
He's just a guy that's very dependable, and he's coming off a career year. I think highs in like every sort of metric. Had a bunch of tackles for the Eagles, 159 tackles, 10 for a loss, 2 sacks. In my Eagles group chat with my buddies, as soon as he got signed, it was like, oh crap. And kind of knowing that the Eagles weren't going to resign him, but he's a guy I liked, and he's a guy you really became familiar with this year because you heard his name a lot because he was just in on a bunch of tackles. So I think he will be missed. I mean, from the Eagles' point of view, they're just never going to be an organization that really pays linebackers. And, you know, they spent decent draft capital on Nakobe Dean last year, and he kind of had to play behind Kaiser White and TJ Edwards because they were playing so well. He couldn't crack the starting lineup. And from everything I read, it wasn't because he was dogging it or not, you know, didn't show him anything. It was just TJ Edwards and Kaiser White were better and they were veterans. So hopefully for the Eagles, Dean kind of comes into his own. And again, the Eagles are just a team that's not going to put a ton of money at the linebacker position. But just as a player, I think it's a good signing. The thing that really I don't think he's like the greatest in pass defense, but again, you know, the type of defenses they were running, they didn't ask a ton for him in pass defense. He's a very reliable tackler, I would say, as well. You know, and some of it you don't know if it's scheme or whatever. He only has 2 career interceptions. He didn't have any this year, so I don't know. He's not a guy that's going to create a lot of turnovers, at least interception wise. Mm-hmm. Didn't force any fumbles. Obviously, you'd like to see a little bit of that. I mean, would have been great if he could have created a turnover or 2 in the Super Bowl. Maybe we get a different outcome there. But as he's just kind of like a reliable, steady tackler who's just going to rack up a ton of tackles. And maybe that's his downside is he doesn't have those. I guess to compare him to like, you know, the flashy top of the end, your TJ Watts or something like that. He's obviously not up there, but he's like a very good, just like reliable linebacker that's going to get you tackles. That's going to be there and run support. I know that was a big issue with the Bears. So I totally understand why the Bears would go after him.
How much is he going to be missed by the Eagles? They lost 3 players today, Javon Hargrave, Edwards, and there's the safety. Who is it? The Epps. Yeah. So how much is TJ going to be missed by the Eagles?
I think a lot of it depends on how much they get out of Nakobe Dean. The fact that they didn't try to re-sign Edwards makes me think they're going to re-sign their other linebacker, Kaiser White. So that'll help kind of fill the gap there. But yeah, I mean, again, he was just like a guy you could trust. And there certainly with a linebacker, you want someone there in the middle that you know is just going to be there and rack up a ton of tackles. So yeah, I think he will be missed. But again, I think the Eagles are banking on the upside with Nakobe Dean, considering where they drafted him and just kind of how they viewed the linebacker position in general. You will see. Like, of the guys that got signed today, I think Hargrave, probably the biggest guy they're going to miss. But again, the Eagles are sitting in a place where they have a ton of cap space and a ton of draft capital. I mean, much like the Bears, not quite as much as the Bears after they traded down out of 1 there, but the Eagles have the 10th pick and 31st overall. So I would be very shocked if we don't get a stout. I think one of those picks is going to be a defensive lineman, which will help, you know, fill the gap from the guys they're losing. But I expect to see a D lineman there at 10 or at the worst end of the first round there.
Yeah, Eagles with the 10th and 30th picks of the first round, so they can easily find some solutions to those problem areas that they're going to be facing. And, you know, this happens to teams that go deep into the playoffs, into the Super Bowl, and they usually are going to lose some players because their market value is going to go really high. At $19 million, do you think that's a deal for the Chicago Bears?
I don't know. Again, you got to always like look at the his guaranteed money is only 12. So that's usually what ends up. That's usually the only thing those guys actually see. Again, it's probably like a fair price. He's not a guy I would pay, you know, so essentially what, 12 million guaranteed. He's not a guy I would pay like $7-8 million to. So you definitely, it's probably like right there on the price for like a reliable starting linebacker. Yeah, because I think other teams were interested. So I think it was going to be tough to get him cheap. But still, I don't think no one could call this an overpay.
Sean Green, I know you just arrived in Las Vegas, so it's very nice of you to set up your equipment and join us here on the Barroom Network. I really appreciate it.
Oh, appreciate you having me. And yeah, thanks. And everyone check out the Sports Gambling Podcast. Got a ton going for March Madness. And yeah, we'll be diving into the NFL draft as well.
And where can people find you on Twitter as well?
At Sean T. Green or at Gambling Podcast.
You got it, brother. Thank you very much. All right, that was Sean T. Green. Guys, there's a debate or a conversation in the chat room going about where's Edmunds going to play, where's Edwards going to play. So I'd like you guys to discuss it. Danny, you first.
Edmunds will be the weak side linebacker. Edwards will be the middle linebacker, and then Jack Sanborn's going to be their Sam linebacker in their base, in their base 4-3. And then when they go to nickel, obviously, you're going to have both Edmunds and Edwards in there, and I think Sanborn then gets relegated to the bench.
Yeah, it's funny, Danny. I not that Aldo wants us to disagree, but I don't think you're going to get much disagreement from me there. I thought Sean Green's description and kind of overview of what Edwards brings to the table is valuable and insightful. And I as much as I agree with you that you're going to see Edwards playing the Mike and Edmunds playing that weak side linebacker, I actually think it's just, and I don't know if you've thought about this, it's kind of a unique change compared to what we're so used to, whether it goes back to Monty Kiffin, to Lovie Smith, to even what Eberflus kind of had going in Indy. And so what you kind of see is Edwards is that guy that isn't super athletic, but is instinctive and kind of plays faster. And that really reminds me of Lance Briggs coming out. Greg Gabriel's talked about the fact that, Lovie said, I don't want that guy because he's not athletic. And they're like, just watch the tape and you'll see. And I see that a lot with Edwards. And, Lance was that weak side linebacker here. And it's just, I think you're going to just see a little bit of a flip there where Edwards is the Mike playing that kind of that athletic profile of Lance Briggs. And then you're going to have Tremaine Edmunds, who's that athletic profile of Brian Urlacher. But they're going to deploy him much like Shaq Leonard in that will spot. Now, I will say the only real difference I do think, though, is that you're going to have the length and the athleticism from Tremaine Edmunds to be dropping into the Tampa 2 looks, those inverted cover 2s, talking about taking care of the digs, the in breaks, the bench routes, things of that sort, those deep curls, as well as having him probably play up on those power slots or those athletic tight ends. So in those scenarios, I could see him probably taking care of the middle of the field much more than I think you're going to put Edwards out there, where he'll take care of the flat and the first to fourth defender.
Yeah, that's the thing that these guys both bring you is that ability to be able to drop back in coverage and make plays on the ball. I mean, how many times, even with Roquan Smith, I was a big Roquan fan, but there's a lot of times you saw him get lost in coverage. Yep. I think that's one of the reasons why this coaching staff and his $20 million asking price is probably the reason why Roquan's on this team, is because I think his coverage skills weren't as good as some of these guys are. So I think that's one of the things where they said, you know what, you're not the linebacker that we can trust, for 4 downs out there to be dominant. You could probably be dominant first, second down, even on some third down situations. But just, I think they like the fact that Edmunds brings that athletic ability, that length, and again, and then Edwards brings you that, the instinct to be able to quickly read and diagnose and be able to kind of be one step ahead of what the offense is doing, just because he's done the film study. He's a guy that's more cerebral than athletic, and then again, that's obviously productive when he gets onto the football field. So, there are times where, these combine numbers and the athletic abilities are they're off the charts and we love them. But, it comes down to on Sundays is just being a football player. And I think Edwards is a guy that might not, is not a guy that tested well, but I think he's a guy that brings the instincts and just is a damn good football player. So I think that's where Edwards, and that's why one of the reasons why he was high on my list in terms of a guy that I was hoping that they would go and kind of sign and bring in. And unfortunately they did that.
Well, and I think you're seeing, and I'll be very quick, Aldo, I think you're seeing kind of that point of with somebody saying, don't forget about Jack Sanborn. TJ Edwards is that same type of guy where, look, the film says something different than the athletic testing. I'm sorry, but it's just the truth. And I mean, Cliff had mentioned like, hey, the money's where the will is. And I do think in this case, follow the money. They're not paying 18 million, 17 million for a Mike backer. They're playing it for the will. So again, follow that money. That's where Edmunds is going to play. And I mean, really and I know, Danny, you can probably speak to this as well. It just makes sense that this is the guy that they started falling for. In the NFL today, the way that the game is played in the modern level, you need these lanky backers that are condors. And what's so special about Edmunds is that he's not a former DB or safety like, Christian Harris out of Alabama or one of these guys, Dan Henley, where they don't have that prerequisite size of a backer. I mean, he looks like he's coming from, a decade ago as a linebacker, but he still possesses all of the athleticism to be that coverage ace the way that, I mean, Aldo, you have a clip there where he's covering Mike Gesicki down the seam, and that's Fred Warner stuff. Like, I mean, that's what Fred Warner's responsible for doing. That's why Green Bay drafted Quay Walker. This is the standard for what linebackers need to be able to do today. And so really, it's like I said, it's a very boom or bust, because I'll be frank in saying I don't think his production at Buffalo has warranted this contract. But I also understand that when you see the highs, you've got a coaching staff that's Dave Borgonzi and Coach Eberflus saying, give me the traits. I promise we can get that out of him every play.
Yeah, at the combine, Eberflus was asked, what are you looking for in these defensive players? And he said, 4 things that I wrote down because it stuck out to me. He says violence, length, tenacity, and be able to get after the quarterback. Now, he doesn't give you much in terms of get after the quarterback, but he's got violence. When he hits you, you can feel it. Yep. He's physical when he tackles you. He's got the length, obviously, and he's got the tenacity to be able to go sideline to sideline and make plays. So I think, and that's the same thing with TJ Edwards, same way, tenacity, the length is not there in terms of just like Edmunds, but he's a guy, like I said, he's just cerebral, a guy who knows where to be, and a guy that can make plays and take on blockers and shed and stack and be able to, get at the ball carrier. So, that's one of the things where I knew the coverage was going to be good with Edmunds. That's why I asked Chris from our Buffalo representative in terms of, how is he in terms of at the line of scrimmage, at the point of contact, being able to, take on blockers, stack and shed. He said he's gotten better. Obviously, when he came into the league, he was only 20 years old. So, that's an area of his game where he had to get better at. So, we'll see. Hopefully that is the case. He is, better in terms of being able to take on blockers and stacking and shedding. But, we talked about it earlier, defensive line that's where you eat blockers. That's where you give these guys the ability to kind of roam free and get a clear path to the quarterback. And as we were just talking here, a couple of linemen that I had earmarked, Jermon Jones signs with the Seahawks. And Zach Allen goes to the Broncos. So, there's another couple guys off the board there. Is it time to panic? Not yet. I still think like Ryan Poles has something up his sleeve. I just, it might be a trade. It might be someone that we are not earmarked as being available. And next thing Wednesday comes around and the Bears might make a trade. So we'll see what happens. And obviously the 9th pick, the elephant in the room there is Jalen Carter. How far will he slide? I've heard some reports where there are more things that are going to come out. Obviously, that's just a report. It's nothing confirmed. So, if more things come out in terms of some of the off-field stuff, he could take a tumble down the board. And if you're the Bears, they're doing their homework. They're doing their due diligence as they should. And if you're comfortable taking them, whether it's at 9 or maybe dropping down a couple more slots and picking them up, that definitely could be a nice, fit there inside your defensive line. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, these guys coming off the boards quickly here, and it's getting a little slim pickings in terms of the defensive line.
Guys, great stuff. Let's turn our thoughts over to Gabe Davis, the offensive lineman acquired from the Titans. What are your thoughts on him? I think both of you had him on your wish list. Jordan, start with you.
Yeah, Nate Davis is funny. He's a guy that I had kind of pegged as like a dream realistic target for me. I'm a big fan of John Robinson, the Titans, and what they had built there and kind of their island of misfit toys. And to me, Nate Davis I'm looking for war daddies on the offensive line, like people that are just going to road grade and open up highways for your running backs. And don't get me wrong, pass pro is important. And although I know we've heard you and we've talked about it before, that interior protection is the best way to support your quarterback. And so I'll be the first to say that's not Nate Davis's strong suit. I think he can certainly improve in pass pro. But again, I think some of this is about, we want to run the ball. We want that to be our identity. We want to bash your teeth in so much that when we hit you with the play action or the boot game with Justin Fields, you have to respect it, because Tevin Jenkins and Nate Davis have just been pancaking your guys left and right on every single play. And I think Nate Davis is a guy that's real squatty. If you watch him in his stance, he's almost lower than any defensive lineman getting out, which really gives him an automatic boost in the leverage game and getting under the pads of a defender and kind of jackknifing them up through here to kind of get them moving backwards and put them on skates. And so what I really found impressive is with him, especially, and before I give this over to Danny, is I think he's a big guy. And like I said, he's kind of squatty, but he moves exceptionally well for his size. I know people think that the Titans are this gap scheme. That's all they ran, but they ran quite a bit of zone with Derrick Henry there. And he really got after it to the point I was putting some clips on Twitter today of him getting out in space where you've got linebackers complaining of he hit me below the kneecap, and that's not fair because they're just like, how is this big guard getting to the second level on the backside and reaching me so quick? And so this is easily my favorite signing of the day. Davis is a guy I've been on for months and been begging for Ryan Poles to snag him. And to me, it's nothing better than feeling like my scouting eye is kind of matching with what the GM's doing at the Bears. And so I love it.
Danny, what do you think?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, top of the show, I made a list of 10, unrestricted free agents that I wanted the Bears to go after, and TJ Edwards and Nate Davis were both on there. And similar to what Jordan just said, he was a guy that's tenacious in terms of his run blocking. If first glance, you don't think he's a fit for this scheme in terms of being able to move laterally, but for a guy who's 316 pounds, he's a guy who's got some nimble ability, also has some nastiness to him. He's a guy that will bury you. And you guys know me from all these years of doing these scouting reports. I love my offensive linemen that go ahead and will take advantage and bury a defender when you have a chance. So, that's something that Nate Davis does as well. Pass blocking, again, he's a right guard, and he's a guy that could get better there. But again, 5 games into his rookie campaign, he's a 3rd-round pick out of Tennessee. The kid got the starting job at right guard and has never looked back. He's been a starter for Tennessee since then. So that tells you in terms of, how impressive he was for Tennessee. And again, you get a guy that can come in and probably, be a starter day one for you. And again, there's more work to be done. Right guard wasn't a position that had earmarked in terms of, necessarily a position you can go ahead and upgrade day one. But I think the Bears obviously went ahead and said, we need to improve our interior offensive line. And Nate Davis is the guy that does that. The guy I was actually looking for as well is Isaac Samolo from Eagles. But he's still out there. He hasn't signed yet. I'm curious to see. Davis has played predominantly right guard. Isaac, I think, has played some left guard. And if I'm not mistaken, Jordan, if you know off the top of your head, correct me if I'm wrong. But, that'd be a nice guy if you're looking to kind of secure the interior of your offensive line. I think, and again, Cody Whitehair to me is just a guy. He's not great. And he's not horrible. But if you designate him a post June 1st cut, you save about $9 million up against the cap. And I think if you can upgrade there with a kid like Isaac, or maybe if you get to the point in the draft where you bring in a Skoronski from Northwestern to play your left guard, and I've been talking about fortifying that left side of your offensive line. The more you have fortified, the better it is. But obviously right now, center and right tackle are going to be my primary focus, and see how this team goes about fulfilling those 2 spots. So, but yeah, Nate Davis is a nice, nice signing there. Again, nothing broke that broke the bank or anything like that. Had an off year this past year, missed the last 5 games with an ankle injury, so he wasn't up to par. But yeah, definitely a guy that was a surprise that they were able to get him done. And again, the more protection Justin Fields has, the more weapons he has on the outside, that's going to make me happy. Now I just got to get some more players, especially a right tackle, and then let's talk about defensive line.
Guys, we got some breaking news. Thanks to the chat for letting us know about this. It's being reported that the Bears are signing former Titans defensive tackle DeMarcus Walker to a 2-year deal worth about $14 million, and that's according to Mike Garafolo. Walker had 7 sacks this season. Guys, I see Jordan smiling broadly. What say you about this, Jordan?
Well, I mean, I guess call it a bias, but you see the baby blue he's wearing. I'm telling you, you're not going to find me disagreeing with Mike Vrabel guys, John Robinson guys. This is a guy that can certainly, it's funny, he's got a very unique body, and it makes total sense to me when you see it. He looks like an Eberflus 3-tech. He's got and in a 3-4 odd front, he's played some edge. He's played kind of that 4-eye inside. But this is a guy that if you wanted him to shed a few pounds or kind of play outside and be just kind of a thrasher that's going to just body your tackle on a 5-tech, you could do that. Now, of course, we're not going to run that in this scheme. So it looks like he's going to be your 3-tech. Now, again, I don't think this is that splash signing, but this is talking about maybe passing on a Draymond Jones because you're not willing to commit $17 million a year to your 3-tech in free agency. And you want to go with this guy of kind of a prove it. And I look at DeMarcus Walker, like he's a guy that's kind of ascending, never broken out, but he's always been productive. He finds ways to stick on teams on 1 or 2 year deals. And I would encourage any Bears fans, I'm excited to hear what Danny has to say, because if you've watched any DeMarcus Walker, this one makes sense to me. I really like the player.
Yeah, this is what we call I think a player that's ascending. Jordan, he's a kid from. I remember him from Florida State because when I heard the name, I'm like, oh, wait, the guy was an edge player out of Florida State. 6'4", 280 pounds. That's where he was. The Broncos drafted him. He's played defensive, and I believe that was the Vic Fangio defense. Yep. So they had him playing a 5 technique. So obviously, the numbers weren't there. The production wasn't there. I think in 2018 only played in 3 games, so it might have been injuries there. Looks like, he had 1 start in 2019, and then 2020 only 4 starts. I think this past season is where, kind of got more of an opportunity, and looks like he was kicked inside to defensive tackle. Now, this guy only started 6 games last year for Tennessee and had 7 sacks and 10 tackles for loss with 16 quarterback hits. So, this is, limited production. Sounds like a guy that was kind of brought in as part of a rotation and produced for them. So, he might be a guy that, could be part of a rotation up front. We talked about, Tremaine Edmunds going to Seattle. So that once they lost out on him and Zach Allen, this is probably another guy that just kind of brought in and say, all right, you know what, he can come in and he can give us some snaps at defensive tackle. By no means are they done. I think this is just more of a guy, if I had to guess, as opposed to bring him in as a starter. I think they brought him in as more of a rotational piece, a guy that's going to be up front there, kind of coming in and out in terms of the defensive tackle rotation. So, don't freak out and think this is their 3 technique. I think this is just a guy that's going to, in limited time last year, being kicked inside for the first time in his career, produce some solid numbers with the limited amount of snaps. I think this is a guy that they see as a nice depth piece and a guy that can give him some nice snaps, especially on pass rushing situations. So we'll see what else they add to it.
You're spot on, Danny. I mean, that's the thing too, is you kind of alluded to those stats, and I hope people realize that's in a limited role, and he's just owning it, the stat sheet. I mean, those are the guys you're looking for that are putting up those measurable stats. And I mean, I see Zimmerman's here talking about 16 QB hits. Like, that's important. That's pressure. That's getting to the quarterback and getting in his face and making him feel it, even if he's getting the ball off. And again, this is not a starter. This is a guy that Todd Downing and that Titans defense was kind of scheming up opportunities while they had guys like Harold Landry out for the year. They were struggling to find pass rush, and you find it in a guy like DeMarcus Walker here. That I think is like I said, you're absolutely right, Danny. This is not your set it and forget it 3 tech, but this is that value that we're talking about that I'm so excited with Ryan Poles, where I'm not going to break the bank for a guy that I don't believe deserves 17. So sure, I know everybody thinks that the money's just endless and you can just afford to spit it out wherever you want, but to me, $7 million a year for a guy that put up stats in a limited role. How much, again, ascending, where is that ceiling? How much more can we get out of him? And where can we put him? And this is the thing. I think if you put him head up on a guard and you find a way to scheme those 1-on-1s, he's going to beat the hell out of a guard more times than not. And that's the pressure that you're looking for.
And the thing is, I'm trying to look up Tremaine Jones' number. I think Tremaine Jones only had 6.5 sacks last year, and but he was a starter, right? So, but again, he gets the money from Seattle. I just looked at the breakdown of his contract. It was $23.5 million the first year, and then 35 some million in the next 2 years. So it's a little front loaded. But again, you're paying him $23 million for a guy who only had six sacks, and I think that was a career high last year. So this kid here, Walker, had 7 sacks last year. Again, limited role. But you're paying him $7 million as opposed to paying him $23 million. So again, I think that there's more to come, and I think that this is just. I mean, remember when Lovie Smith was here? That was just like they would bring in guys, kind of rotate guys here and there, whether it's the ends or the defensive tackles. So I think this is the more of the same here. They're just going to continue to bring guys that can bring you a presence especially on third downs. Already he's a leader, team leader in sacks, right? Because I mean, up until that was what Jaquan Brisker was a leader in sacks. What was it, 4 or 5 that Brisker had last year, and he was the team leader in sacks. So that was pretty pitiful. A defensive unit that your safety, your rookie safety, was your leader in sacks. So again, just a piece of the puzzle. Not someone that you're gonna go sit there like Jordan and I have been saying is gonna be your day one, day 2 start, week 1, week 2 starter. Just a guy that's gonna be there and it's gonna give you some competition there, especially if they bring in some young kids, some rookies as well.
Well, and Aldo, if I could just get one last thing in here too. I mean, this is the thing that just drives me crazy because I know people are so obsessed with the household names, whether it's McGlinchey because of draft status or any of these other things. But I really wish that fans would realize that right now, Ryan Poles has 10 lottery tickets and again, that can expand, that can reduce. And I also don't think of those 10 tickets as they have to go just on 3 days in April. One of those tickets could be a round 2 pick for a Laramie Tunsil if you want to make him the highest paid tackle on your team. Again, we're theorizing here, but I'm saying you can use that. That's the flexibility that he's created. So it doesn't all have to be done on one day in free agency. And I know everybody wants a Draymond Jones or a Javon Hargrave, but there are still great players out there. Yeah, we talk about DeMarcus Walker, a guy, and I'm sure you're relatively high on him, Danny. I'm taking I guess a leap of faith here, but Charles Omenihu is kind of that same type of role player to me, and I like Charles Omenihu. You've got Greg Gaines out there that can play your one tech. We talk about keep those linebackers free. Let Greg Gaines eat up some space. Like,
you're jumping ahead, Jordan. These are the guys we're going to talk about in terms of guys that are on the list. Come on, reel it in, Jordan, reel it in. But no, but seriously, I just pulled up Draymond Jones' numbers, and again, I was first one that said I wanted the Bears to go get Draymond Jones, but he had 6.5 sacks last year, which was a career high. And he had 10 quarterback hits, again, was a career high. DeMarcus Walker, they just signed right now, had 7 sacks last year, a career high, and 16 quarterback hits, and again, in a limited basis. And then Draymond Jones started 13 games last year. So that's what I'm talking about in terms of Ryan Poles. Aldo touched on it earlier, and I tweeted out earlier as well. The fact that he's not going out there willy-nilly, just spending all the cash because he has it. I appreciate that, especially for a young GM. That his first job, first time being in charge of an organization, he's showing some restraint, and will it pay off at the end? Only time will tell. But to sit here and after day one of the legal tampering period to say, the Bears are doomed and gloomed because they didn't get this guy or that guy. All I'm saying is, I tweeted out earlier, I'm like, RELAX, guys, let's just relax. It's a long off season. Let's see what happens in the draft. I'm there with you guys in terms of I want pressure up front. I want guys up front that can be able to make plays and allow these linebackers we signed today to make tackles and roam free. But we can't just Rome wasn't built in one day, right? That's the motto I hear all the time. So let's just see what happens here. This is just a piece to the puzzle. They missed out on a couple of guys, and now they're just kind of adding pieces here. And I'm sure that there's plans again. Just we never know. There's guys out there that I can't say names, Brett, because I don't want to be spreading rumors. But there's players out there that we don't think they're available, or could be available, and they're defensive linemen. And just hold on right now. Just hold on. Let's see what happens. And if those things don't come to fruition, which I'm not saying they may or may not, the draft is still there. There are tons of players that I've been profiling and breaking down, and luckily the right tackle position and also the defensive tackle position isn't as deep. But if you have accumulated enough picks, which they have 4 of the first top 100. I believe it's 6 of the top 103. You have an opportunity there to go ahead and bring in some defensive linemen that can be part of your rotation and be starters for you eventually too. So let's just see what happens. Let's see the total package here. The day to judge Ryan Poles and what he's done or did or didn't do this offseason is week 1 of the NFL season.
I'm going to come to Jordan's defense here because I did not send him the rundown that I sent you, Danny. So that's why he was jumping ahead. Right. But we're going to get there as planned.
Well, this is the thing. I have a question for Jordan. You've been so hard on Ryan Poles.
I have.
And today it looks like he's turned you around. So are you a Ryan Poles fan?
No, so I'm not. No, let me be clear though.
Right.
I don't necessarily think I'm one way or the other. So I've been telling people that are like, hey, you owe him apologies. I try my best to be fair and judge in the moment. And I really don't approve of much that went on in the first year. But I also really think that this franchise
was that a surprise though, Jordan? That's the thing, is like he kind of told us what he was doing.
Yeah, you're right. And I mean, I guess so it's a difference of opinion of feeling like, hey, you don't have to totally reset and rip off the Band-Aid. Now, I'm not talking about quick fixes, but I think that you could have maybe pushed harder than surrendering and just kind of packing it in and putting Justin's body at risk and giving, these efforts where, look, I mean, it's some of the ugliest football I ever watched. When you've talked about it, having Brisker, your rookie safety, being the leader in sack artist on your defense, and you're paying guys that aren't even there anymore. And Roquan's high in sacks, and he hasn't been on the team since the trade deadline. So I didn't love everything that he did. But to answer your question about where I'm at now and why I'm so happy is this franchise has been missing, I guess you could say, just practical, pragmatic, and logical process since probably Jerry Angelo and Lovie Smith. And I mean, we could talk for 40 minutes and as much as Aldo wants to give it to me, but I think what's not even being talked about is the way that he's building the team through. And it's more than just today, but at least specifically with what you've seen today, when the world is his oyster and he has all the money in the world, the way he's choosing to allocate assets and where he's placing it and what he's capitulating to and what he's not is the difference to me between what makes a good GM and a bad GM. Anybody can throw 20 million at a right tackle and then all of a sudden have to try to patchwork the other pieces of a team. But what you're actually saying is, hey, you know what? Let me go ahead and throw some money at an off-ball linebacker, maybe any other position, defensive line. And look, I think he's going to spend in D-line. But you know what I know for a fact is I don't think he wants to spend a top 100 pick on an off-ball linebacker and then have to coach that guy up. I think he wants a guy that can kind of come in and do that already. And then
the
you know what?
linebackers aren't that deep in this class either.
No, and I'll take a right tackle or I'll take an offensive tackle or one of these value positions, a corner, when I can pay a fifth of the price for them on a rookie deal and coach them up and get the traits exactly as I want and not have to pay that premium for a value position. The way that you're saying Jawan Taylor and Mike McGlinchey, who's got injury history, and all of these guys that have these what ifs that, I mean, if you're really an elite talent at those value positions, you never hit free agency. That's why you have McGlinchey with injury concerns and Jawan Taylor. Everybody wants to talk about how he's some pass pro specialist. And we want to totally ignore that Doug Peterson, Press Taylor, and Trevor Lawrence had the best time to throw rate in the league. And they were running mesh and West Coast concepts that didn't have to put Jawan Taylor in a bad spot pass protecting. But again, that's the nuance and context that nobody wants to consider. They just want to say, I watch the Jaguars play in the playoffs and Jawan Taylor's my right tackle. And if it's at $20 million a year, damn it, that's what we're paying. And that just doesn't jive with me.
Right. And then the thing is just real quick, if they didn't do what they did last year, and I'm all for in terms of putting Justin Fields in harm's way. But I think after that was 4 or 5 weeks after that Washington game that they kind of figured, hey, let's find a way to make him. And for that 5 weeks straight, they're averaging 30 points on defense. On offense. So and then obviously the trades happened on defense and the defense went to shit, and then their team was done. But if they didn't do that, they wouldn't have the first pick in the draft this year. They weren't able to trade that and now accumulate picks or, going into next year and so on and so forth. So that's one thing. The other thing is to show the restraint. Like, look what Denver's doing. And who's running Denver now? It's Sean Payton. He's the same crap, same thing they did in New Orleans. Is just, overpay these guys in free agency, especially this year where it wasn't a great free agent class. I mean, there are some solid players, some guys that, yes, come in here and improve this team overall, but they weren't guys that you would go and break the bank for. And Denver's breaking the bank for all these guys. And Sean Payton learned under Mickey Loomis and from New Orleans, and Ryan Pace learned from Mickey Loomis in New Orleans. And that's what Ryan Pace did with the Bears. And that's why Ryan Poles came in last year and had to clean that crap up and now get back down. So the fact that he's showing restraint and he knows that it's a free agent class, that it's not great, no need to go ahead and overspend and pay these high prices for players that are slightly above average, I would say, not even great players, right? So, the great players were tagged or were kept off the market, right? So, even some guys like I was high on, like Javon Hargrave, good, solid player, had a career year in his 30s, didn't fit the profile. Would I have liked to see him on the Bears? Sure. But would I have played him with the 49ers? No, because the Bears aren't one Javon Hargrave away from being a dominant defense. The 49ers probably are. I mean, they're already a pretty good defense. Now they got even better for them. So, but Draymond Jones, another young developing guy, would have liked to see him to come in here play? Sure. But am I paying him $24 million his first year and then 17, 18 million the next 2 years? No, I'm not doing that either. So that's the thing is, like, I like the fact that he's doing this, bit by bit. And again, I think you agree with me as well, Jordan, to have a lasting winning program, you need to build it through the draft and then just kind of fill in your spots via free agency. They're not there in terms of filling in those spots via free agency. They're just trying to get this kind of off the ground here and just kind of get building here and moving. But the draft is going to be crucial. And I think here, if you can get a couple more pieces here to kind of solidify a couple of your holes and then not fulfill everything else from the draft. And remember, guys, there's going to be another wave of free agency, veteran free agency, if you will, after the draft. After teams that made picks, and lo and behold, guys or veterans are going to be cut, and then you're going to be able to get guys on 1-year deals. Riley Reif was a guy that Bears brought in last year, and while he's not great, he was very serviceable and a very solid upgrade at right tackle for the Bears once he got in there. So, players like that is what you're going to kind of still have the capital and the money for to go ahead and pick these guys up and be able to pounce when you have opportunity. So, I know it's a big splash. NFL Network puts it on all day. ESPN's on it all day, but it's it's the restraint you show in these first couple of days where the smart deals, I'm not saying bargain, don't go bargain, basement shopping, but just make smart deals where it doesn't hinder you going forward in terms of your salary cap and the organization overall too. So that's the one thing that has impressed me about him as well.
Guys, there's breaking news about Zach Allen, the former Cardinals defensive end, reaching an agreement.
I mentioned that earlier. He went to Denver. Once Draymond Jones signed with the Seahawks, Denver went and got him, and they gave him $32 million guaranteed. Again, nice player, a guy that was playing, five technique. Now he goes to Denver, who brought his defensive coordinator from Arizona last year as their defensive coordinator, Vance Joseph. So there's familiarity with the scheme there, familiarity with the coaching staff. So that could have been a kick there. But he would have been a nice guy. He's a guy that could play some base defensive end for you. I saw him as a guy you could probably kick inside to be a defensive tackle. But obviously, that's a number that's a bit too high for a guy that you're kind of just kind of projecting as at the next level as a defensive tackle. So we'll see how he goes. But again, Denver just throwing the money out there, with McGlinchey and then with some of the other players and with Zach Allen, and so we'll see how it turns out. But I just I kind of like the restraint that Ryan Poles is showing so far. And again, just continue to build up. He's got 10 picks going into this draft, and he's probably going to end up with 12 or 13 players coming out of it, just knowing what he does, in terms of trading down and moving up and down the board. So, the one guy that I really, really want is Tyree Wilson. And if there's a way they can come out of this draft with Tyree Wilson or Jalen Carter or even a Will McDonald, I'll be happy in terms of that defensive front.
Let me tackle some of the questions that we have collected. Laz wants to know from you guys, did any of you guys see these two linebacker signings happening today? Jordan, why don't you go first?
Not at all. I mean, and like I said, it's not that I'm mad about Edmunds or Edwards. I just thought Okereke was as chalk as it gets. And I became really fond of him studying Eberflus's Colts tape on Bare Necessities 10 or so months ago. And so I really thought that was the one that made sense. But no, I didn't think that they didn't pay Roquan 20, so I didn't think they were going to go out and give Edmunds 18. And you definitely thought a linebacker was going to be signed, but there was no inclination that it would have been Edwards until about like an hour or so before the tampering period opened.
Mm-hmm. What do you think?
For me, yes and no, because Edwards was a guy I earmarked for them to go after. So that was a pleasant signing, but I did not expect them to go get two of them. And Tremaine Edmunds was going to be a surprise for me. That blew me off, off my couch. I'm like, I had no idea they were going to go get two of them today. And Edmunds being the big ticket guy they got, obviously. So yeah, no, I did not see two linebackers being signed today.
J2K asks, Jordan, I know you really liked Okereke. Some people say Okereke, some people say it was something else. Do you wish he was one of the linebackers we signed, or are you more happy with the two Eds?
It's funny to me. Yes, I would have preferred Okereke over Edmunds, especially knowing what he got from the Giants. But I also understand that things happen for a reason, and it was very clear that for whatever reason, it didn't work. Maybe it was Poles that didn't like Okereke. You would presume maybe Borgonzi or Flus would have said, bring him in. We know him, but I will say this to kind of add a little nuance to it is I certainly don't think, and I mean, I'm sure Danny would disagree because he likes Edwards, and so do I. This is not an anti-Edwards thing, but I had Okereke as a step above Edwards. And so to me, this is the nuance, is what clearly doesn't work is I cannot pay $50 million guaranteed and 18 a year to Edmunds and then also pay $40 million to Okereke. It just doesn't work. I'm not giving that much cap to two linebackers on my team. What I can do is I can afford Edmunds at that 17, 18 million a year and annual value, and then bring in just a small step down from Edwards at 6 million a year, as opposed to 10 or so million a year? Because that's what we're talking about. Is you hear the Washington Commanders are in a real stretch where how are you going to pay all these defensive linemen? You've got two defensive tackles eating up, 40 million in a year. You're going to be at about 30 million if you pay that exact same contract to Okereke at 10 million average a year, as well as your 18 a year. That's almost 30 for two backers. Those don't fit together. So in some ways I understand, look, we want to hit, two birds with one stone. I talk about the Duke Tobin approach of instead of one Trey Waynes, go get yourself a Chidobe Awuzie and Mike Hilton. This is that same thing of fine. As much as we'd love to just hit it out the park with one star backer, we're going to find a way to kind of piece it together here. We're going to have Edmunds as kind of the big ticket, but we're also not going to leave it there. We're going to pick up another one in Edwards for a much more modest amount than what Okereke had.
Guys, let's get on to you guys sharing who you would like to see the Bears target over the next few days in free agency. Who's on your list of players that are still available? And if you mention a name that has recently been signed, we'll forgive you because this thing is happening fast and furious. So, Danny, why don't we start with you?
Well, a couple of guys I had mentioned, and one of them was Zach Allen, which we just saw. He's signed already. But another player that I think both Jordan and I agree on is Charles Omenihu from the 49ers. He's a base defensive end, 6'5", 280 pounds. Not a guy that's got big sack production. I only had 4.5 sacks last year with the 49ers, but 16 quarterback hits. Again, a guy that can come in and be serviceable in terms of a base defensive end. In terms of the interior, Sheldon Rankins is a guy that's out there as well. A little up there in age. He was a 12th overall pick in the 2016 draft. I believe he's actually only 28 years old, but he's a guy that gives you that quick twitch upfield burst in terms of from that 3 technique. With them signing Walker today, maybe Rankins is not going to be an option for them, but he's definitely a guy that his highest in terms of sacks was 8 with New Orleans back in 2018. So he's a guy that I think could give you some of that pass rush ability, but maybe again with signing Walker, he might be out of the picture there. We talked about, Frank Clark. We mentioned him in terms of a guy who was cut. Again, just a guy that can be serviceable, can start up front for you. One guy that I didn't think I was going to put down here, but the more he's sitting out there, obviously CJ Gardner-Johnson is a guy I absolutely love, and I would love to have him on this team. I keep saying it over and over again. So before I forget, let me just mention him. Okay. But Byron Murphy, the corner from the Cardinals, is still out there. 25 years old, second-round pick with 33rd pick overall, top of the second round. He's a guy that obviously comes from that Washington University. We already have, what's his name here, Keller Gordon. So he's a guy that plays some outside. I think he'll play some inside corner in terms of nickel as well as some slot corner. So he's an interesting guy, 25 years old. I'm not sure what his market's at or what he's looking for, but definitely a guy, like I said, they're going to get a nickel corner, whether it's in the draft or in free agency. So, Byron Murphy is a guy to keep an eye on. Definitely, again, in that range we're talking about, guy that's going to come out of his first contract, looking for a second contract, right where, Ryan Poles is looking for. So Byron Murphy is a guy to look at. And in terms of offensively, I think receiver, you're good there now. You're probably going to draft one in the 3rd or 4th round, I'm assuming, in this. So I think you're good there. Tight end is a position I'd earmarked maybe Mike Gesicki. But again, looking at this tight end position in the draft, it is a deep tight end group. So, with accumulating more picks is what I'm assuming they're going to do. They might take a tight end in the draft. So that's going to be something they're going to look at. Obviously, I don't think they're going to take a linebacker in the draft. Although I read somewhere where the Edwards contract can be broken down as a 1-year, $8 million contract. So, maybe they bring in a guy and, day 3 as a guy that can kind of take a chance on and develop. So we'll see there. But, tight end is something to look at as well. So in terms of Jeffrey, again, right tackle, McGarry is a guy out there in Atlanta. I know he's a guy that was a 1st-round pick, known more for being, a mauler up front as a run blocker than a pass blocker. But again, that's some guy that if you can get him on the cheap, and, he's been sitting out there now for, 24 hours, if you will. If you can bring him in on a 1 or 2 year contract, if his market isn't what he thought it was going to be, I could be something to take advantage of it, and you can solidify right tackle until you're, 2nd-round pick or 3rd-round pick comes in and develops behind him, and then you can kind of just, slide that kid in there as well. So, those are some of the players we're looking at. Isaac Samola from Philadelphia is a guard, but again, with Nate Davis on the board now, I'm not sure they can go get another guard unless they have plans to move Whitehair center or just make him a post-1 cut. So there are still some intriguing players out there in terms of free agents that could come in and help the Bears. But obviously, the bigger name guys are looks like they're coming flying off the board right now. So.
Jordan, don't be afraid to double down on any of those names.
Oh, I'm certainly not. It's funny because, Danny and I, we're simpatico. We see eye to eye on the quarter situation. I think Danny and I, we love our offensive linemen that are just like, maulers. That is kind of what CJ Gardner-Johnson is to me. He's a guy that you want to talk about just brutalizing and beating up slot receivers. You put him down in the box. He'll fit the run. He's a willing tackler. And obviously we talk about his please.
And he brings a different attitude to the defense. Yes. He changes the defense. And you talk about someone that brings that dog mentality, and it's infectious. The whole defense takes over it. Yeah. And also he makes plays on a ball. He's a ball hawk. He's 6 interceptions last year. This is something he did with the Saints, and obviously this past year with the Eagles. Again, I know Philly's trying to re-sign him, so I don't know how reasonable that is to kind of pry him away from there. But man, if you can get him on there, that just changes your whole complexion of your defensive backfield, and also what your defense now possesses, the swagger that you want to see out there every week in and week out.
Yeah, he's a spark plug for a defense, and so I love that call. I mean, who knows what his price will be? He's one of my top, because he is today's defender, where he can play safety, he can play nickel. He's got that versatility, and I mean, Byron Murphy, to that same credit, I actually thought Byron Murphy was a guy that would have already been signed. I thought he was just due for a big ticket contract. He's shown he can play inside and outside, and he's a willing tackler. Funny enough, I remember Byron Murphy probably being the biggest standout when the Bears played Kyler and the Cardinals. Was it last year, the year before that? It was a year before that. So just a really good corner, somebody that makes sense. And if he is lingering, I wouldn't be surprised if they want to take a chance on him. Again, he's a physical player, willing to tackle, and he's athletic and can play inside and out, just like his teammate at Washington, Kyler Gordon, that is. And so for me, just kind of those guys that linger. I know we talk a lot about tackle, and George Fant is a guy that I don't think is getting talked about enough. George Fant is not young. I understand he's 30, but there's still not a ton of health concerns there. You talk about Riley Reif being that older veteran that you can pick up for cheap. And I look at positional versatility. George Fant is a guy that's played left. He's played right tackle. He's out there not getting a lot of publicity over guys like, McGarry that are still out there. Josh Nyman and Terrence Steele were actually my top 2 targets as free agents, but I understand they're restricted, so you'd have to give up some type of compensation to go get them. But there's a discussion there too of Josh Nyman's a guy that has all the versatility in the world, comes from Green Bay, understands Getsy. So that's a tackle option there for, I believe it's a 2nd round tender if you were to go that route. We talk about center. You still got guys like Garrett Bradbury out there, center from Minnesota, who actually had a good year under McConnell, the head coach there, as well as having guys like John Feliciano, who opened up that run game for the Giants as a center. He can play center or guard. So there's options there on the offensive line, and this is what I'm talking about. I'm with you, Danny. I'm not all about bargain bin shopping, but I don't think you always have to go for the big name or, oh man, what are we going to do because you missed out on the top center. Ethan Pocic is no longer there. There's still options, as well as Ben Jones, who I absolutely love. And you've got Ryan Poles on the record talking about he drafted Creed Humphrey because it reminded him of Ben Jones, and Creed Humphrey's a hell of a player. So if you want to talk about a veteran leader that can come in, has chemistry with Nate Davis, because he played center for the Titans and can definitely take care of the protection call, so it's off Justin's plate. I think that's a good idea. And then as well as for defense, you talked about it, Charles Omenihu, good inside-outside versatility player. I think about Samson Ebukam, a defensive end there that nobody's really talking about from the 49ers. I don't think that they're going to be able to keep him. And he's a nice kind of bendy athletic player, has shown it back when he was with the Rams all the way to the 49ers. And then you start talking about guys like Greg Gaines from the Rams, who never got enough publicity but can play 1 tech. I even think he's got enough kind of show to play 3 tech. Now, I'm not saying he's the most explosive guy, but I think he's got versatility to play kind of along that interior line. And then you have guys like Tier Tart, who I understand he came from that odd front, kind of played that 4-eye for them. But I think he's plenty disruptive and kind of, I guess you could say, a bull in a china shop, really likes to thrash offensive linemen. So those are the guys that I think of just off the top of my head when I'm thinking about guys that aren't getting talked about, aren't getting discussed as potential options. You still have guys like Yannick Ngakoue out there, who's always consistent as a weak side pass rusher. I don't necessarily think he's leaving. He's always followed Gus Bradley throughout his career, so I see him probably sticking with the Colts. But there's plenty of options out there.
You know, the kid Brendel from, I think he's the 49ers. He's a center.
Jake Brendel.
Guy, so that's another guy that obviously the wide zone scheme with the Kyle Shanahan system. So he's familiar with what the Bears are running here on the Getsy. So that's another guy in terms of a center competition that you're going to bring in for Lucas Patrick for sure.
Guys, great job getting together here on a Monday night after just a few hours after the announcement of these signings and providing instant analysis. Fabulous job. Let's go around the horn and offer up any final thoughts. We'll start with you, Jordan.
Again, always Danny, Aldo, thank you so much for having me. This has been a pleasure. It's just fun to talk ball again. Barflies, thanks so much for tuning in. And I've genuinely made as Danny kind of alluded to earlier, I'm really harsh. It sometimes maybe people think I'm a little too harsh, but I try my best to be just genuine and fair when I think things are going well. And from my perspective, and again, I call it as I see it. If I thought it was bad, I would let you know. But I think there's so much positivity and a swell of good process and procedure and leadership and the right moves being put in place that if there's ever been a time to be excited and positive and feel comfortable knowing where the Bears are headed, I think you've never picked a better time.
Danny Shimon, your thoughts?
Yeah, for me, it's just again, day one. I just want to tell everybody just to kind of relax. Let's see what happens. It's a off season that's going to continue on through the draft and even after the draft. Once like that second wave of veterans get released and cut, and I was looking forward to seeing what they did today as well. And I think they got off to a surprisingly good start. I think they got 2 off-ball linebackers where as a position of need. Obviously, and I think they got 2 solid players, and I think that this is going to be something that's going to be built gradually, right? And just like everyone out here in the chat room, just like Jordan, just like Aldo, we all know that they need to add to the defensive line, they need to add to the offensive line, and I think they're going to do that. Let's see what Ryan Poles and Ian Cunningham and everyone else up there does in terms of fulfilling out this roster, and let's judge them on what that roster looks like week one, not day one of the legal tampering period. So just I ask everyone just to be patient and let's see what happens here. And I think going into the draft, I think what he wants to do is just set this up where he doesn't have a glaring need going into the draft. So I think that's what Ryan Poles like to do, and I think he wants to be open for the word that he uses a lot is flexibility, and he wants to be flexible and be able to either trade down or trade up if he needs to. But I hope he trades down because I want more picks. That's just me. But we'll see what goes there. But definitely, let's just my message to you guys is just let's take a deep breath. Let's see what happens. Obviously, some of the bigger names are off the board, but let's see what he does here. And once it comes around, the league year starts. Trades can happen. They can be official, and we never know what's going to pop up. So take a deep breath and let's see what happens here in the rest of the offseason.
Guys, you brought it tonight, as you always do when you're on the Barroom Network, and I want to thank everyone in the chat. We had a record crowd. I saw the number 400 hit my little marker, so lots of
Jordan brings the crowd out.
Jordan brings his fans with him.
Not me. I wish that's not me.
Always seems that when there's a big transaction involving the Bears, the Barroom is the place to go to. So really appreciate everyone who has jumped into the bar, and thank you to Retro for the nice tip. We'll let you know that tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Central, it'll be Bear Their Souls. We'll talk about all the latest news coming from Halisaw and what Ryan Poles is coming up with. And then on Wednesday morning, it will be Gabriel Talks Football. And Greg, I'm going to really put him on the spot because he texted me some insider information. I'm going to try to get him to announce that to all of you and watching live or watching on demand. And again, the best way to stay on top of everything that we do here at the Barroom is to subscribe to this channel, Barroom Network, or to follow me at Barroom Network on the Twitter handle. And don't forget to follow Jordan T. Silvera, and I'll spell that for you. The last name is Silveira. That's all one word, Jordan T. Silvera. And, of course, Danny Shimon is at DSHIMON56 Jets. No, I'm just kidding.
Aaron Rodgers' new
my gosh, we didn't even talk about that train.
Talk about a prima donna. Jesus Christ, man.
Well, here's the thing. I got to say this. This guy is a drug addict. And I can't believe any team would want to wait on him to make a decision. He's probably stoned in some cave somewhere. Move on. The Jets should have signed Garoppolo.
I think it's done because a lot of his teammates are tweeting that some stuff that lets you to believe that it's there, but I don't know what they're waiting for in terms of the final. Does he not want to happen today? He wants to have the spotlight to himself, and because a lot of players are going to be signing today, he wants to make sure he has the top headline. I don't know whatever it is, but it's if you're the Jets, why would you put yourself in a situation where year after year you're going to be begging this guy to come play? It's not going to change.
The Jets are an organizational example of dysfunction where they can never seem to get that quarterback position right, and so it doesn't necessarily shock me.
but Joe Douglas did it the right way. He built that team through the draft. They have tons of talent, especially on defense. And it's like, all you need is a competent quarterback, whether it's Jimmy Garoppolo or somebody else. Pick a competent quarterback out there, and you go and I know it's Aaron Rodgers, and I know you'd rather have Aaron Rodgers than Jimmy Garoppolo, but I'm just saying, like, year after year, you're gonna have to deal with this drama that's gonna can take over your team. Eventually, you're gonna get tired of it, and it's gonna fester into your locker room, and it's gonna cause problems. I just don't. The Packers are openly saying that he had a great career here. Like, they want to get done with him. They want to be. They're talking about him as in the past tense. I mean, that's how bad they want to get rid of him. So, I don't know what the Jets are doing, but oh well.
Lamar. That's what I would do. I'd say go ahead and send your 2-1s for Lamar and give him a contract that the Baltimore Ravens can't match, and see what you can do there. But that's me.
Great stuff. We can easily go another 2 hours, but we love to keep the audience wanting more. That's an old show business slogan. So with that, I'll say thank you, Jordan Silvera. Thank you, Danny Shimon. And thank you, everyone who joined us live, and let people know that this show is available on demand. Take care, everybody.
Bear down.